The following podcast is a presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Welcome to the Sample Chapter podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, my friends. Greetings and welcome to episode 169 of the Sample Chapter podcast. Oh my gosh, we have a doozy of an episode for you today. Yes, you might have seen it. You may have noticed the time on this one. It is over an hour today. And let me just put it this way. That's cutting it back. I had such a good time this week talking with Birmingham, England native J.W. Voyce. And we're talking about his debut novel, Ending Samsara. And I mean, it just, this was one of those talks where you just click with somebody and you're going to hear it come across, I think, how we just clicked. We had such a fun time talking. Everything was like, oh, yeah. And have you done this or have you said this? I had to go through and edit some things just for timing because, we're having the conversation and then he would flip it on me. He takes over the interview and asking me questions and I'm like, oh, yeah, and this and that. But then in editing, I'm realizing, oh man, you guys don't want to hear about me. We're here to talk about James. So I had to do some creative editing here and there to pull as much of my own stuff out of there as I could to put some focus on there. And I think for the most part, there might be one transition that's a little abrupt and you're like, whoa, that shifted quick. But other than that, everything else is pretty smooth and pretty good. It's a blast. You're going to have a really good time. We went down a lot of rabbit holes. And, and I have no doubt James is probably going to end up hosting his own writing show sometime because he's well informed and a lot of fun to talk with. You're going to hear us talking about dialect in writing, like the pronunciation of W, or like here in America, W. The English and American phrases and classes. We talk about how history may judge us in time, teachers who inspired him, and the butterfly effect, and writing that legendary phrase or paragraph in our book that people may, one of these days be quoting from. Not only that, we also talk about refusing to be labeled and staying humble. Just a great conversation. James is so wonderful to talk to, and I'm looking forward to diving into his book. It looks like it's going to be a great read, and hearing his sample chapter today really pulls you in, and got a bit of a cliffhanger ending. So you're going to want to know what happens next. So all that and more coming up here in just a few moments. I'm going to cut some more angles again right now to keep this as short as possible, but I do real quickly need to play the ads for our sponsors, who I am so grateful for. That's coming up right now. Hello friends, Jason here, and I wanted to take a moment to tell you about a great offer from Audible. Like you, I'm very busy. I have a full-time job, a family, I'm a thriller author, and I do this weekly podcast. But I also love to read. That's where Audible is a lifesaver for me. Whether I'm mowing the yard, working out, driving back and forth to work, or doing some other menial task, I can still listen to an incredible book through Audible. And now you can get a free 30-day trial by going to audibletrial.com/samplechapter. By doing that, you'll not only have that 30-day trial, you'll also gain access to guided wellness programs, theatrical performances, A-list comedy, exclusive Audible originals, and even podcasts like the Sample Chapter podcast. Last year is the first time I ever achieved my own personal reading goals, and it was because of some wonderful titles I listened to on Audible. Some of those titles were Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline, narrated by Will Wheaton, the Awaken Online series from Travis Bagwell, narrated by David Stiefel, Patient Zero by Jonathan Mayberry, narrated by the incredible Ray Porter. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention previous guest Scott Meyer with his Magic 2.0 series, narrated by Luke Daniels. It's a lot of fun and definitely worth your time. Hey, full disclosure, by signing up at audibletrial.com/samplechapter. The show does get a little monetization, which goes directly towards any production needs with the show. So you're also helping us out here by signing up. So what are you waiting for? Head on over now to audibletrial.com/samplechapter and start your free 30-day trial today. Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much to Scrivener and Audible for helping support this show. I also want to give a big shout out to my podcast partners, Pop Goes the Culture Network, home to about a dozen other shows, and Project Entertainment, home to about 35 other shows of a wide variety of topics. Shows like this one right here.
Hello, is anybody out there? Anybody. This is Jim Cobb. If you are hearing this, the worst has happened. I've recorded a podcast at the end of the world and will broadcast it on channel PEN every Friday. It's all about the apocalypse, books, movies, TV, how much food and water will you need in your bunker, all that kind of stuff.
Excuse me, sir. You're gonna have to keep the noise down. You're in a library, and you're scaring the kids. The world hasn't ended yet.
Sorry, ma'am.
Shh. You're in the library at the end of the world with host Jim Cobb.
Fridays, exclusively on Project Entertainment Network.
Yes, another fantastic show, one you definitely need to check out. Hey, make sure you click on the link in the show notes to follow all of our sponsors, our podcast friends, and us on social media. If you'd like to reach out to the show, you can do so via email at samplechapterpodcast@gmail.com. You can leave me a voicemail at 660-851-1146. And please do so. I've been getting some calls lately, but they're all coming from fake numbers, ads, marketers, asking me, if I'm looking for dentures and stuff like that. Marketers, look, are you interested in selling your home? Sample Chapter Podcast. No, I'm not. So yeah, give me some voicemails to play on an upcoming episode, everybody, and give me a call. Hey, real quick, I also want to mention, last week I told you all about our TeePublic store. We've got some designs in there for t-shirts and other stuff available. We got more designs coming soon, but as of March 24th, which will be the day after this episode drops, through the 28th of March, there is a 35% off everything sale going on. $13 t-shirts, $8 masks, coffee mugs, notebooks, whatever you want. If you want to get something with that Sample Chapter logo on there, or one of the other designs we've got, which is sample chapters from all over the world. It's a really neat logo. My wife actually just got a t-shirt of that on a baby blue t-shirt, and it looks really good. Looks really good. So check those out, and just click that link in the show notes for that. Okay. Time to settle down. Let's get us on over to our interview with the wonderful J.W. Voyce. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome back to another exciting episode. This week, our guest is J.W. Voyce. James William Voyce is a writer based in Birmingham, England. His shorter works have been featured in several anthologies to date, and his latest novel, Ending Samsara, is available right now. We're going to hear all about that and about JW. So, JW Voyce, welcome to the show.
Hi, how's it going?
Wonderful, wonderful. It's a sunny day, it's been a week of rain here, and now it's sunny, and I'm feeling so glad to have that sunshine. Can't wait to get out into it later on. How are you?
I wish I could say the same thing. It's dismally grey here in Birmingham. I live in it's not the most pleasant looking areas anyway. It's a kind of very industrial sort of town, part of the world, Birmingham, UK. But yeah, it's completely grey here, so not perfect.
Oh.
I must say, I love how Americans say W. Like, it's brilliant. W.
Yeah. I never thought about that. Yeah. Now, how would you say W in England?
Yeah, just W. Like, I mean, there's not. It's they say there's like this sort of bridge. There's a gap between American English and UK English, but the variations are so small, really. When you like,
yeah, I think here in America we get a little more W.
Yeah, I like it though. No, W sounds, it's a bit more spice, isn't it? W. I think that's the difference between American English. I don't know. It's like, I don't want to say more informal, but I think it's just a bit less stuffy. Like, everything's meant to be sort of, properly enunciated and pronounced in the UK version, and I think I prefer some of the American ones. Like aluminum, it's just easier, isn't it? Aluminium. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I heard Simon Pegg say it that way on something here a while back. And I was like, whoa, what did he just say? But it's interesting. I mean, as a writer, it's those little details like that we pick up on that most of us don't really pay attention to, but it becomes important in our writing.
Yeah.
I was writing a scene the other day with a Southerner from America, and I just automatically in my head, it just came out where he, instead of saying "how do you do," he said "how do."
How do.
And that's a very Southern greeting. I know my grandparents, and so that was their thing, was "how do." And it just depends on where you're from, but it adds that extra little bit of flair.
Yeah, of course. Like I can't remember who it was. Someone that had read my book recently was saying, yeah, I enjoyed it, but I did notice one mistake. Someone said, oh, he'll be really pissed about that. But obviously you meant to write pissed off, didn't you? And I was just like, no, the character's American. So the way where we would say, if you're annoyed, oh, you're pissed off. Obviously you guys just say pissed. He's really, really pissed today. Like it's more like that, isn't it? Yeah. Which is, there's those that are obviously going back to that point of the differences. Like that's where a lot of the confusion sort of lies as well, where pissed over here can also mean that you're drunk. I don't know if you have that. Do you have that? Yes.
Yeah. I think they'll say, I hear that once in a while, and
really?
somebody will say pissed drunk.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. But yeah, it's I don't actually know how a lot of these differences have started. I suppose it's just what happens when there's such a gap between, obviously, colonies or whatever it was back then, and it's just developed. But yeah, I was talking to someone about sort of like the class system as well, and like money, because over here, I don't know if you're aware, but the class system is quite an important thing. Like, as in, people, love to be considered maybe slightly more refined than they actually are. Whereas I think in the US, it's not necessarily so. Like, I mean, for example, you don't have we would have what you call like an upper class accent. Like, you don't tend to really have that over there, do you? I mean, billionaires it's perfectly acceptable for them to have like a southern drawl or whatever. Like,
I think you're right. Yeah, I think as far as speech goes, I think the way one will speak doesn't come across as much, depending on your education. But then again, there are a lot of wealthier people who still speak very poorly. But I think more in America, it's more the stuff that you have. You may not be very well off, but you got a decent car and you got the latest iPhone. And maybe a name brand shirt or something that looks like a name brand clothing, so you can kind of put on the facade that maybe you're better off than you are.
In a way, though, I think I prefer that, because obviously in the UK, it's like people tend to sort of sniff out what your sort of background is from not obvious things like that, like, you know, what watch you're wearing, or whatever. It's more to do with your accent and perhaps what school you went to. Big thing is whether you've been sort of privately educated or publicly educated, which is super confusing over here, because public schools are our private schools. It's like a lot of things in the sort of English language. It's like the reverse. Like, if you're a public school boy, that means that you're basically posh, you're upper class, and you've gone to, you know, a private school, which is just confusing. But yeah, there's a lot of snobbery. I don't know if you can't have been blind to what's been going on with the royal family lately and all that kind of stuff.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that's
it's pretty insane.
Been fascinating to hear. It's funny because I guess for me here in Missouri, it's kind of you know, is it any of my business? But it's kind of fascinating. It's like I want to know. And my wife is a very she loves the royal family, like going back. She's a huge the Tudors. She loves that whole thing.
Cool.
She can recite like all kinds of stuff. So she's very much with the royalty and knowing what's going on. So she knows more about this than I do. And it's funny because, you know, you look back in history, it's like, okay, yeah, well, that I'm into, but something going on today, for me, I'm more like, oh, I don't know if that's any of my business, really.
So, I kind of feel the same way, you know, like it is interesting. And I mean, everyone, I suppose, has got their own story. And I mean, we've mostly just heard, you know, the pair of them and what their story is. And the as usual, the royalty don't usually respond to things like this, so they haven't given, you know, much of a defense. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of it was true, completely true. Like it's just such an old-fashioned sort of organization, like institution. They probably do have some quite slightly, you know, backwards views and things. But yeah, you mentioned the Tudors. I think they're far more interesting in that period. Like just all bloodshed, isn't it? And just like when the royalty actually had power and they could, you know, just fight against laws and then just decide, oh, you know, I'm not married anymore, or like, decide to just behead your wife because you weren't happy with her. Pretty nuts, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's where my wife and I differ, that she's very much the you know, classic English history. I am much more, and maybe it's the male in me, I don't know, I'm much more into the American history of like the Old West and things like that. And she wants to tell me like, well, but that was such a brutal time, and you know, people would just kill. I'm like, wait a minute, look at this.
I do respect the kings, like back in the old days, though, because the ones that actually used to go into battle, so that you can kind of get behind. Like, I think, like if your king's like ready to, you know, I mean, I'm sure they were probably protected a little bit and what have you, but the fact that they actually get onto a horse and swing a sword,
sure, yeah,
that seems a lot more impressive than, you know, just someone that basically it's just a PR campaign, isn't it? The whole thing, it's just like, just look at this massive palace, I'm gonna shake hands with this person, I'm gonna kiss this baby, like, you know, like a president kind of thing. It's what it's become now, isn't it? It's just like this big novelty.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see too much of that anymore, of the days of a world leader jumping on the front lines. All right, follow me, let's go.
I suppose the one difference is that Prince Harry, the one that's it's all about, is he was an Apache helicopter fighter.
Right.
So that's, I suppose that's like our modern day equivalent. Like, I mean, I hear that you're quite protected in those situations, but I've heard also that he's used a gun and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's something. He's willing to do that. It's pretty cool, I guess.
Yeah, and that we can only hope that should trouble arise, that maybe our leaders will actually rise up and do what we want them to do and lead us in, something like, so let's say an alien invasion comes about, well, hopefully they'll all work together and lead us, and
Yeah.
now we
I think that's
become one world again.
I think that's what we need, isn't it? We need like common enemy, like an intergalactic enemy, so we can maybe that'll be the only thing that'll bring us all together.
Right. Yeah, because otherwise we're left with waiting for us to be long gone and see, we'll never know how history looks upon us,
Yeah.
regardless of whatever face or facade we're putting up today. Only history will be able to tell who we really are, or what they really thought of us. So you how did you get started writing?
So writing's always been what I've enjoyed, to be honest with you. It's kind of the only subject in school that I enjoyed or was kind of any good at. I noticed that my teachers, because I was a particularly bad student, to be honest with you, and for more reasons than just not enjoying the subjects. Just like it was so we're talking about the public private school system. So we went to a comprehensive, which is what you'd call a public school, and it was a particularly sort of, I'd say, rough one. A lot of fights sort of breaking out, and and things like that. And me and my friends, we sort of bunked off a lot, like just ditched lessons, went outside into the fields to smoke and things like that. So yeah, but English was the only lesson that I enjoyed, and I felt like you could get good grades with. So, and it turned out that my English teacher helped me out a lot with that in terms of the deadlines. I know that for my final assignment in what we call our GCSEs, which is like what you do before you then go on to like higher education after school, she basically extended one of my deadlines. So I was meant to have handed in this assignment like for whatever date it was, and I didn't do it. And she sort of knew that I was good at the subject. She didn't want me to fail, so she kind of just like let me off by a week, which is really bad when you think about it in terms of like the other kids. But I think it was that, and just getting good grades. So I got the highest grades as well in English at the time, and I knew that I was good at it. But I didn't actually start writing for a few years after I'd finished school and stuff. I went on to university, and I did obviously written assignments. And I did like a science-based course, but I enjoyed the actual essay writing probably more than the other subject matter. Actually learning things. I enjoyed just writing and then it kind of just after leaving university, I sort of just decided to get back into it. So I was probably early 20s then. I mean, I'm 31 now, so it's probably about a decade ago. And I was just like, right, I'm going to write a novel. That was the first thing I decided to do. I didn't skip all the short stories, went into full-blown world-building novel, which is probably a bit, like running before I could walk. But yeah, so I knocked out a 200,000 word novel straight away. Like I haven't really looked at it since. So that was like probably 8 months ago. But it was, I think that was quite a good, it's a steep learning curve. So that helped. And then I just eventually started writing short stories, entering them in sort of competitions and submitting them for certain anthologies, etc. And it's brought me to now, sort of 10 years later with this book.
All right. Well, so do you feel like that teacher inspired you, helped inspire your desire to continue working?
100%. Yeah. It was no, she was very good. Like I need to sort of send her a copy of the book, to be honest with you, and just a little thank you. I'd definitely say that, because I don't want to diss my school too much, but the standard of teaching wasn't amazing across the board, and the way the teachers spoke to, a lot of the teachers spoke to the students wasn't always the best. It wasn't the most inspiring sort of environment, but she was she was good, and I think she was the type of teacher that noticed that if you cared about the subject and you did want to get into it, like she'd help you. Like if you just messed around, she was like, no, screw you. But yeah.
Well, that's great though, and it's that seems to be a common theme. A couple of things that you said with authors I've spoken to. There's always been, there seems to be a lot, somebody in our past that has given us that extra spark and inspiration that pushes us on. Even myself. Now, the first novel that you wrote, the 200,000, is that is that Ending Samsara, or is that a different book?
No, that's like I don't know if I'll ever revisit that. I might. I've thought about it recently. I think I'd have to basically butcher it, like, well, not butcher it, like take it apart completely. Probably change a lot of things because yeah, it was very fresh. And like, I don't know about you and your own sort of experience, but when I sort of delved into it, you kind of delve into it with a lot more confidence than you probably should have. I don't know if you would say, like, you get in and you start writing, you think, okay, I'm going to write something amazing, and then you sit down.
Everybody's going to love this. I'm going to be so rich.
Like, this paragraph is going to be like legendary. People are going to talk about it. And then you finish, and then you maybe send it to a couple of people, and they're like, yeah, that's okay, blah, 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 I didn't like this and this. And you're like, really? I thought this was groundbreaking. But like, oh my God, it humbles you. But that humbling is good, and I think that's how you should be. I think writers should probably stay humble their entire careers to keep writing good stuff. I think the moment you start believing your own hype or whatever, I think that's when you kind of start losing your audience. Maybe, I don't know. That's just how I look at certain authors. I mean, because if you look at authors that are still pretty much on top of their game after, you know, years and years, Stephen King's a good example. Like, whenever you speak to him whenever you hear him in interviews, he always talks like someone that's still just trying to please their audience, still just looking for that compelling story. He's 100% not doing it for the money, because he's got enough of that. Just like, he's just into the craft, and he wants to improve, and he doesn't talk about himself in like, because obviously he's one of the most prolific writers ever. Like, he's like, the things he's created are obviously, you know, say what you want about him. You can say he's not particularly highbrow or whatever, but just the diversity of his work sort of speaks for itself. And he's just quite self-deprecating. He's sort of like, yeah, you know, there's a lot of people better than me, or, you know, I'm pretty good at this, but I'm not very good at this. And so it's funny for someone, a billionaire, like, who's been doing it for 50 years probably, to be that humble.
Yeah, he's quite incredible. And I read his book on writing about, oh my gosh, 15 years ago or more.
Me too.
And really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then a few years ago, I got I had an Audible free credit. And I thought, oh, well, you know, maybe I should listen to this. I'll listen to it, because he narrates the On Writing book, and it was a totally different experience. And it was one of the rare times where I listened to it. I thought about it when it was over, and then I hit play again, and spent the next week just kind of like really listening intently. And usually I will work and listen to a book or a podcast in the background, but I had to, that next week, I just had to like sit down and like take notes, and like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. It was like experiencing the book for the first time in a whole different way. And and I think part of that is just my own life experiences that happened in that time frame. But hearing it from him, or hearing the author read something, it gives you something, kind of like what you were saying, where when we write something and maybe we're there with somebody who's reading it, and they flip past the page that we thought was brilliant, you know, and we're like, oh wait, didn't you like that part? And like, oh, which part? So hearing it from the author, that you get to enunciate or put that extra inflection into something that you wanted to emphasize. And then, I was able to pick up on things that he was talking about a little more. And yeah, it was really incredible.
It's interesting you say that about hearing it from his own voice. I've watched a few sort of readings he's done as well, and I'm just jealous. Like he one take every time. Like literally watched him do one of his short stories, which I presume is probably about 5,000 or 6,000 words, something like that. And like, let's say it's 6,000 words, no mistakes. Like, which I mean, obviously he's been doing it all his life, but yeah, I couldn't help but be impressed by that. But the bigger thing was as well, he's doing it in front of this big audience. Like, imagine he's sitting on a stage in front of thousands of people, probably at least several hundred, and just perfectly reading out 6,000 words of story. Like,
oh yeah,
no little stutters or anything like that. Like, it's just, yeah, he's obviously had a lot of practice. Like, it's impressive.
Well, that's my plan. Eventually, one of these days, I'll have this show on the air. It'll be like Graham Norton, and I'll have the authors will come on and read, and it'll all be live, and no more recording and editing and all. No.
Well, I'm glad you're still sticking with the editing part. Right?
Oh gosh, I don't know how authors will go up before a crowd and do a reading unless you're just that confident in it. Maybe they've practiced it and they're just going to enjoy themselves. But yeah, it's really something.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's impressive. Yeah, maybe we'll both be there one day. Infinite Jest. Have you read that with David Foster Wallace?
I have not. No, but I'm going to write that down.
It's a commitment. I'll tell you beforehand. Before you delve into it, it's absolutely massive, and it's one I enjoy it. It's up there, probably my top 5 maybe. To be fair, books I've ever read, but it's so long, and it's also got basically it's got so many references that it's kind of like. It's got this massive sort of index at the back of it, just explaining each kind of reference. It was written in the sort of I think mid-90s, but yeah, just reminding me when you said about something that's thrilling but has a lot of jokes in, and I do tend to like sort of dark humor as well if it's done well, like in books. If they, because obviously they might be talking about sort of heavy topics. But I think it's helpful if you can kind of make light of certain things sometimes, and like if you do it well and artfully, then it's good. Yeah,
I agree, and I know sometimes it's not everybody's going to get that, but it sure is nice when you get that one person who will like email you or make a comment and go like, "Oh my gosh, that scene where they're trying to defuse the bomb and somebody said this joke." It was just like, oh, I was right there. I understood that and I got it. And it's just like,
cool, yeah.
Or whatever the scene is, like, that's always fun. You get, even if just one person gets it, like, yes, a little bit of redemption. Somebody got it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I feel vindicated for that joke.
Yes. Me and that one person in the world, we got it. We're connected now. So now you also write a lot of short stories and flash fiction. Tell us a little bit about your short stories that you enjoy. What do you enjoy most?
So I can't remember who I read. It's an author. It might have been George R.R. Martin, actually. Game of Thrones, right? He said that short stories are important because they teach you brevity. Like most problems with authors is. Most of the problems that authors have basically is that they tend to be verbose and they like to just go on these long sort of complicated winding sentences, whereas it's like why use 10 words when you can use 5, like, and get your point across a lot quicker. And obviously because you're confined to maybe even just flash fiction could be a couple of 100 words or whatever. You've got to make every single word count. It's got to pop, like, and yeah. So I think it's a good learning exercise. It's also good for so I'll do a minute plug here. Like if you can basically put it online, and it doesn't take much time out of people's sort of days to just have a look at 1,000 words. I mean, 1,000 words is less than most sort of news articles. So you can just pop on there. I remember I think another inspiration was what's the author's name now? The guy that wrote the Martian. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, Andy Weir.
Andy Weir, yeah, that's it. So he have you ever read it's called The Egg, a short story by him?
Oh no, I have not.
Excellent short story, and I read it through the weirdest way. Like, I've got absolutely no idea. It was on some sort of, this is like a long time ago. I don't think it was quite MySpace level. It wasn't quite that far. It was like back when Facebook was like a really new popular thing, I think, or something. And I was on some sort of, post or thread or whatever it was. And someone had commented basically the entire story, like as a comment. And I remember just being like this guy's written like a really long comment. What the hell? And like clicked on it and just kind of got pulled in by the first sentence. And then I realized, it's a short story. And I was just like, just ended up carrying on reading it because it was so compelling. And like, I mean, it was probably like a 5-minute read, but I'd just been trapped into reading it really randomly on some kind of Facebook comment, and it had captivated me enough to read the whole thing and then find out exactly who the author was. I was like, oh yeah, it's Andy Weir. He wrote The Martian, blah blah blah. And yeah, it was. But yeah, if you ever definitely read that. But my point was, I think that he basically stuck it up on his website, and I think that's what actually kind of where his big break came from. Like he must have obviously promoted his website, etc., but he pulled everyone in with that one short story, The Egg, and I think that was kind of like one of his sort of big foundations.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I see you have a lot of your short stories available on your website, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I'm going to start adding more, but yeah, so this is where the small plug came in. Sorry that I didn't actually do a second ago. But yeah, just jwvoice.com, jwvoice. Yeah, and so you can look at flash fiction stories. There's little tiny ones that will literally take you like 2 minutes to read, and then there's slightly longer ones, but you're probably not going to be on there for more than sort of 10-15 minutes reading one story. But yeah, I'm going to do that with all my shorter works. I'm just going to eventually just get them all up on there. I think there's probably about 9 or 10 on there at the moment, but I'm going to add a few, I think, this week. Yeah, so I've got, I mean, eventually, if depending obviously what happens, I mean, as well as me, you don't know what's going to happen in our sort of future. Hopefully you want to try and make it more of a name for yourself, get out there, but hopefully I can maybe put them in an anthology sort of one day together. But for the time being, I'm sort of happy just sticking them on there for free.
There you go. And that still is, it's a great way to there's people with books that they give away for free, just to get that little bit of extra attention. And yeah, that's a great way to do it though. What do you like to write when it comes to your short stories or flash fiction? Is there a certain genre or specific something?
Yeah, you probably have to describe most of the stuff I write as a thriller, but thriller's the main sort of like I think you said the same thing. Thriller with the odd joke in there maybe, but but I'll try my hand at anything. I mean, there's a couple of, like, I try to balance out the dark stories that I write with lighter ones that are a bit more feel good and not so depressing. So I've got so there's a few light ones, and I've put on the website which one, whether it's because it'll have the genre sort of thriller, whatever, or I think there's a couple of romance ones on there, I think, but nothing too soppy. I'll just point out. But yeah, I like to be versatile, or at least try to be, and I don't want to sort of ever pigeonhole myself in one category. Like, I mean, I have respect for certain, the big big authors that are known for one thing, like in particular, and that's what their audience expects of them, and that's what they're going to deliver. But I don't think I'd ever want to be put in that sort of that category. Like I'd like to sort of mix it up as much as I can.
I agree. And and we've been talking about Stephen King, and a lot of people know him as the king of horror, but he's so much more.
Oh my
And
God, yeah.
even back in the day, I mean, he would write under a pseudonym just to write something different, to have out other stories. And now that everybody knows who he is, he can just put out whatever he wants, and they know what, it's Stephen King. So maybe it's romance, maybe it's a children's story, or something completely different. It's just King. So,
Yeah, no, I think he has successfully broken out of that sort of horror typecast, to be honest, because he I mean, it's the guy that wrote Carrie, The Shining, and also The Shawshank Redemption. Like, it's like completely different. Like I think someone said to him once, he was speaking to someone on, like, an old lady was asking him about his job, and he said, "Oh, I'm a writer," and she was just like, "Oh, what have you written?" He said, "Oh, my most recent one is whatever it was. I can't remember exactly, but it was one of his horrors." And she's like, "Oh, I don't like stuff like that." She said, "Oh, that sounds horrible. It doesn't sound good. Like, you know what I like? The Green Mile. That's a good." No idea that he'd written it or had it had anything to do with it. Like, but yeah, so that's pretty impressive, I think, to be able to, not be stuck in a box like that.
Well, I mean, and I think that's a great thing to aspire to, that maybe we can eventually reach a point where it's just our name that defines us, not one specific work in particular, but it's like, oh yes, this is a Voice book. It's going to be incredible. You're going to love it. So, and I mean, speaking of writing the legendary phrase or paragraph, I love this quote on here that comes from your book. How significantly can you affect another person's life without ever meeting them? Which is a quote, everybody, from from James's book, Ending Samsara. That's a great phrase. I love that.
Oh, cool. So that's basically the premise of the book. So that's the whole premise in one sentence, which is basically, so the book's all about kind of 6 degrees of separation and small world theory. And although, so I'm not a religious or a particularly, I wouldn't call myself like a spiritual person, but I think there's quite a lot to be learned from sort of Buddhism and a lot of these like old traditions in terms of just karma, for example. Like, it sounds like quite a sort of airy fairy, sort of thing. Just because you do one good thing doesn't mean something good's going to come back to you, that kind of thing. I get that. But if you just think about how connected we are with everyone, like, I mean, I'm talking to you now, like thousands of miles away, like with such a closely connected planet, especially obviously with the advent of the internet, it's getting closer and closer. But there aren't many steps between you and someone that lives on the complete opposite side of the planet. So if you do good things, especially within your own community, there's quite a good chance that they will come back on you. And obviously the reverse works too. So yeah, so it's just this idea. So the central character, basically, the point is that he hears that comment, or that question, sorry, as like a header on a Reddit thread. And he's a bit conceited and a little bit arrogant, and he basically thinks like, what? No, that's like, if you don't meet people, if they're outside your circle, like, you're not going to affect their lives. Like, they're not going to affect my life. Like, so, and a lot of the novel is him basically learning how completely wrong he is. Like, and yeah, it's just all about the 6 central characters and how little tiny things that you might think are trivial could affect someone else, thousands of miles away, without them even knowing it, without them ever meeting you.
Yeah. And I mean, and books are a great way to do that. We very much like your phrasing. I mean, we never know how we're touching somebody else's life. It's funny that you would, I don't know how you want to describe this. It's like you're saying, whether this is something spiritual or whatever, how this is coming up now for me to be hearing this and seeing that phrase. Because I was just talking about this like 2 weeks ago,
Oh, cool.
doing an interview on another show. The guy who runs that show was one of the people that inspired me to get to do my own show and to get back into writing. Some advice that got me motivated to get back into writing. And then he quit doing that for a while, but I was inspired by that and got real about some of my writing, and then started my own show. And then years later he starts a new show, and I reached out to him. I was like, hey, this is great. So he asked me on his show, and I just wanted to take a minute and tell him, like, look, you don't know this, but I mean, you've really inspired me. And my books and my show is all, in direct relation to things that you've said in the past on your show. And he had no idea. And
That's so cool.
it's funny how, and then here we are talking about, this exact thing. And that's kind of what, you're saying that's what your book is about. And that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fascinating subject, because we like to think that that we're so different, and that I don't know if you heard of this term, sort of this idea of solipsism, where it's basically you kind of think that the world revolves around you, like you only see the world from your eyes. So you kind of, you take a lot of things more personally than maybe you should, and you kind of think, oh, it won't happen to me, or wow, it's going to be different because it's me. Like that's the kind of attitude that most humans have. But we're like exceptionally, well, that's probably the wrong word, like we're extremely similar, like in so many different ways. And obviously we can affect each other in so many different ways, like, and I think it's probably like a good idea to remember that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's almost like a butterfly effect, that we have no idea whether we're the butterfly and we're flapping our wings and causing the ripples, or if we're a part of the ripples in somebody else's window.
Totally. Yeah, I think there's a comedian as well said that basically everyone thinks they're the lead actor. I think he was talking about like Denzel Washington. He's like, everyone thinks they're man on fire. Like you're probably just the extra in the background. Like,
right.
Which is a bit harsh, but like but yeah, it's funny really.
Well, so now how long did it take you to write this?
And in Samsara it probably took about a year, maybe slightly longer with kind of editing and things, but yeah, the story was down in a year. It was, so I don't know what your writing style is, if you're a kind of seat of your pants kind of writer like Stephen King, or if you're a big planner. But I don't really know what I am, because every book seems to have a different process. Like for Samsara, I was forced to write it in quite a strict, almost formulaic way, because basically I set out with the intention that these 6 characters have all got to like affect each other. So character A will have to affect character B at some point, do something to do that, and then character B in turn will have to do something to affect character A. And so when you write with that intention in mind, like it means that you basically you can only order it in a certain way. So you're kind of confined to ordering it so each character can do what you'd set out to do. So learning that, the first thing I did was create a pattern. So it was just, like I was using sort of ABC. So it would be like A to C, then C to D, and then like, if you know what I mean. And basically with that, so it almost sounds like maths. It's like, because there were 6 characters, that meant that there'd be 30 chapters in total, and then I worked through it that way. So yeah, that sounds like quite a, like I say, like a formulaic way of doing things, which it is. But most of the time, I prefer to just sit down and just let the words kind of flow. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of sequels is a big thing as well, isn't it? Like sometimes you just want to move on to something else, and then but you get people saying, "Oh, I like this. Well, when are we going to see more of these characters in particular?" And you're like, "Oh, I hadn't planned on it at all, to be honest with you."
Yeah. So yeah, by the time that person's holding the book in their hand, I'm somewhere else now.
Yeah, exactly.
My mind is no longer connected to that character.
Totally. Yeah.
So what is next for you? Do you have plans for
Yes. I'm already, like you say, I'm the same thing. So I'm already into a completely new novel. I think I'm about 120,000 words in, and you know when you're like you're writing it and you're like, how long is this going to be? I can't see the end yet, really. Like I've got a vague idea of how I want it to end, but yeah, it's mounting, like the word count's mounting, and I'm happy with a lot of the words and expressing a lot of things that I want to express. But yeah, this one would be what you call less plot. So Samsara is completely plot driven. Like I think that would be, I mean, there's character development in there, but it's all based on the plot. Whereas this current one that I'm writing is totally character driven. So it's just about personal transformations, and it starts off with these three characters when they're basically children, and then you follow them throughout their lives, and yeah, so it's kind of more like, without trying to be pretentious, I mean, it's more like social commentary and kind of how it is in the UK. So it's all based in the kind of, the three characters are English, and it's kind of like we were talking about earlier, actually, about the kind of the class system, because I think it is an interesting thing, and it's just like just the idea of judging someone based on how they were brought up, in the sense of what schools they went to, like how they speak, etc., just seems so bizarre and stupid to me. Like that it's a good thing to comment on, I think. And yeah, so over here we've got we'd call working class what you guys call like blue collar. Okay. So obviously, so what I've done is one character is like a working class blue collar character. Then we've got another character who's what we call sort of middle class. But middle class is different to US, I think. What you call middle class it's so confusing. Like, is more kind of working class, because our middle class is actually quite posh. Like, as in, it's like you're quite well spoken, like better spoken than I would be, like kind of thing. And you're quite refined, and your parents have got a fair bit of money if you're middle class, because then you've got the upper echelon, which is upper class in the UK, which is like there's hardly anyone's upper class. You've got like royalty, it's got certain like nobles and dignitaries, and people that live in like these insane manors, like blue-blooded people, and you can't really be you can't work your way into that. If you were born working class or middle class, you can't earn enough money and then become upper class. It doesn't work like that. Like, you have to have been born into it. So it's like this secret society almost of people that are just snobs, basically. People that just like, I don't obviously tar everyone with the same brush, but like, it's just an interesting. I just find it fascinating that we've got this kind of system, and it's just it's weird. So I wanted to kind of explore that in this latest novel. So yeah, long story short, that's long story long, as it turns out. That's what I'm writing at the moment.
But that's a great thing to explore, and especially when it comes to characters and you get into those stereotypical ideals of somebody, and then you play with it, because what we see may not be who they really are.
Yeah,
which is a lot of fun when it comes to storytelling, and make that little twist, like, oh, you thought this was just a dog walker. Nope. They're a serial killer. You never know.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's great. You'll have to let us know when that comes out, and that way we can let everybody know that your next book is available.
Awesome.
Well, meanwhile, where do people go to find and follow you?
I've been terrible with social media. Like, basically, I haven't done anything with it for a long time. I've finally just started to jump on that bandwagon, like a bit too late. But yeah, so I'm on Instagram now, and where else? Twitter, but I think Instagram is probably the best place to find me. I've started posting on there now, just things I've been reading. If I post a new short story, and then you've just got jwvoice.com as well. Yeah, easy way to remember it. It's the person that I spoke to on my last podcast sort of reminded me that. So she thought my name was fake, like, as in she thought it was a pseudonym, as in like because she was like, "Oh, you're clearly a fan of James Joyce, the Irish writer," and you've done a spin on that. And I'm like, no, because obviously there's just one spelling different. Instead of Joyce, it's voice with a V. But yeah, so it's VOYCE. Yeah, so jwvoice.com, and then Instagram, just jwvoice. It's handy because it's not a very common name, so the handles are easy to get.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we'll have links for all that in the show notes, everyone, so that way you can get in there, follow James, and of course get to his website and check out some of these short stories, and then of course hop over to Amazon and grab the book and follow him, find out what he's got coming up next. James, thank you so much for coming on. I could just talk to you for hours. I mean,
I feel the same way, Jason.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's such it goes along with your book. I mean, the connections that we make, we never know when we're going to find somebody that's just like that common spirit, and like, oh yes, we have so much we can talk about.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Eventually I've got to bring this to an end, and otherwise we're going to do a 3-hour podcast episode. But thank you again for coming on. And ladies and gentlemen, time for me to hand the floor over to my guest, J.W. Voyce, with Ending Samsara.
Marcus ended the call, fighting a fierce impulse to vomit. It took him several minutes to overcome the trembling in his legs. Although his heart rate had resumed its normal pace, his stomach remained unsettled as he reread the article on his phone. The man wasn't lying. Frantically, he started to gather stuffed bags of his belongings, running outside with them through the back door of the house. He had no time to defend his behaviour to Matilda. She just stood by the door watching him pass her, seemingly waiting for an explanation. "Come on, I said we have to go now." "You said tomorrow." Just pack all your shit right now. If you don't need it, leave it. I want to be out of here in less than an hour." "An hour? No, I can't." "Tilde, this isn't up for debate. I don't have time to go into it right now. Just get moving." Matilda looked like she was about to argue. "Please!" She threw her hands in the air and started sorting small items into a pile. Thankfully, Marcus had already managed the difficult part in the early hours. The produce and equipment was all safely on board. He'd stored all the pre-packaged items under the floor and set up his chosen plants with UV lamps in the upper deck. Tens of thousands of pounds worth of illegal horticulture, all methodically packed away. He'd loaded bin bags, backpacks, duffel bags and holdalls. Just about every type of carrier he had at his disposal was filled to the brim. His newly purchased, but by no means new, motorhome was parked at the back of his property, blocking at least 3 of the shabby, graffiti-covered garages. It took him 8 or 9 trips, but he thought he'd gathered everything, his life for the foreseeable future, all crammed into his 32 by 8 foot space. As Marcus ran outside with the last of his personal gear, Tilde was slowly organising a suitcase. When he returned, she was motionless at the back door with a case still open in front of her. "Come on," Marcus snapped. "What are you doing?" "I just don't see why you have to go this second. We've been safe for nearly 2 weeks now. No one has tried to break in. You're not even sure yourself that they know where we live." "You're right, Tilde. Those men, the ones that want to kill me, I can't be certain they do know where we live." He pointed towards the front of the house. "And I have no proof that van outside has anything to do with them." He ignored Tilde's clear intention to speak up. "But now, as it turns out, we have another person to add to our growing list of enemies." He paused and raised his voice slightly. "And this guy knows exactly how to find us." Matilda frowned. Who? So unless you want to wait around, he said even louder, to find out what his plan is, I suggest you stop questioning me and pack your goddamn suitcase like I've been asking you. Marcus glanced at his wristwatch. You have 15 minutes. He hated being so short with her. It felt like reprimanding an infant for mild disobedience. Is there no way you could just come back and get me tomorrow? Marcus ran his hand down his face. He groaned, but it came out as more of a growl. What are you saying now? Someone needs to be here in the morning. Why? Jay's expecting an important delivery. I told him to send it here and I'd sign for it. With all due respect, Tilde, fuck Jay's delivery. But I promised I'll be in. It's his livelihood. He could be in a lot of trouble if he doesn't. If it was so important to him, he should have made sure he was around to receive it. You can call him later. Right now, you have 10 minutes to get yourself packed and sit in that motorhome or what? She said defiantly. They faced each other in a standoff. Tilde's large brown eyes glistened under the light and her bottom lip quivered ever so slightly. Just move, Marcus shouted, so loud and forcibly that it made her flinch. She didn't argue with him after that. In fact, she didn't say another word for some time. Under normal circumstances, the silent treatment infuriated Marcus. At present, however, an intense tunnel vision kept him indifferent. He'd specifically asked for the motorhome to be parked to the back of the building, away from the dubious van out front. Although, witnessing the sheer size of the monstrosity for the first time had made him realise that even straddling most of the pavement, it would have blocked off their road. This colossal camper was a significant upgrade from the ones he'd browsed previously, and the price had been suspiciously low for the spec. No surprise when considering the seller. From the outside, it was a stark and ugly spectacle. Silver scratches and patches of rust were the only distractions from the unremitting greyness of its body. The interior was nothing to swoon over either. Dismal grey colouring had claimed this too, sweeping across all its walls and carpeting. The ostentatious pine woodwork seemed more in keeping with the early 90s rather than 2007 when it was supposedly built. It was unsightly, unfashionable, and he soon found that its sheer immensity made basic manoeuvring a chore. Despite all this, Marcus was head over heels in love. For its age, the mileage was exceptionally low and the engine ran smoothly. Every electrical component, and there were many, was in perfect working order. It was also gloriously well equipped and spacious, with an impressive kitchenette and king-size bed. Most importantly though, it was his. Just sitting in the driver's seat gave him a boundless sense of freedom and untethered potential. His entire operation, his whole life, all situated in one vessel, fully mobilized with the turn of a key. On starting the engine in this first non-practice run, he felt a good deal of his anxiety wash away. The motorhome was filled with enough narcotics that he'd sooner risk a high-speed pursuit than be pulled over, though he's certain the vehicle was incapable of anything even resembling high speed. Still, he was heartened by the thought of finally regaining control of his own destiny. No longer were they senseless, grazing ruminants, oblivious to the lions hiding in the grass. All right then, here we go, he said when they pulled onto the first dual carriageway that evening. It was 9:30 p.m. and the roads were relatively clear. Tilde gave no response to this, or any other comment he made in an effort to break the tension. After the first hour of driving, which consisted of no further navigation than northwards, he started mentioning vague details of the plan. Okay, babe, real talk. We need to start shifting some of these mushrooms pronto. It's the easiest, quickest thing to kick things off. So can you please get on the forums, get on EVAP, and start taking orders? We'll find a postbox first thing and send them out. EVAP was an encrypted messaging application used almost exclusively by criminals. This is where he orchestrated the bulk of his magic mushroom trade. Psychedelic mushrooms, despite being highly illegal, were the most convenient items to shift of everything he cultivated. They were odorless and could be packaged in neat little vacuum-sealed squares, making them incredibly easy to post. He'd also noticed a distinct increase in their demand over the last year or so, allowing him to steadily curate a comprehensive list of contacts on the little-known app, with buyers spread throughout the country. Any half-informed individual taking a glance at Matilda's bank account would have been deeply suspicious of the credits accumulating month by month. A profusion of personal transfers ranging from £400 to £200, and despite his constant remonstrations, he'd still find the odd moron citing shrooms as the payment reference. Tilde acknowledged his request with a silent nod and the unlocking of her phone. He was confident she could put her sulk on hiatus, disassociating her present feelings towards him with the business at hand. Aside from knowing he'd eventually need to stop somewhere, Marcus's options seemed unlimited. All he had was a range of unplanned destinations, half-soaked notions, and a full tank of diesel. The latter instilled him with the most hope. He could drive all night if he saw fit. Tilde was free to shuffle off to bed at any time, and every mile he progressed would add another between them and the growing number of people who wanted to do them harm. His plan was for them to live a nomadic life and stay away long enough for things to blow over back home. And suppose it didn't, then they'd permanently settle somewhere new. What was so beneficial about living in the overpriced outskirts of the capital anyway? He had no family to speak of, a few good friends perhaps, but he could surely make new ones. The more he reflected on it, the more he realised that Tilde was the only one truly making sacrifices. She had a mother she was close to, a sibling she saw regularly, and a string of loyal friends. Okay, we have to measure out 7 standard portions of Liberty Caps, said Matilda, her eyes still locked onto her phone. 5 different addresses scattered all over, but that won't matter, will it? No, he said, that won't matter. He found a lay-by along a country road and decided to pull into it. Why are we stopping here? Marcus sighed. Look, babe. Swiveling to the side, he gave his legs a stretch. I'm sorry about earlier. Shouldn't have spoken to you like that. Tilde kept her eyes on her phone screen. No, you shouldn't have. I was just really stressed out. Apparently, my Bitcoin account was hacked. Your Bitcoin? He nodded. So this thing was out of our budget. Half of it was paid for with that $8,000 we'd saved, and for the other half, I sacrificed the whole of my Bitcoin wallet. He gritted his teeth for about a quarter of what it was worth. She looked up at this. Oh, babe, you said that was your nest egg. It was. Turns out, though, he paused, making sure to lock eyes with her, the wallet was emptied. Tilde looked up now. Emptied? How? Couldn't tell you. Hackers, apparently. The point is, I passed the account over to this Russian geezer. He gave me RV, and now he feels like he's been cheated. Who is he? Some dude Amir linked me up with. Serge, I think his name is. I'm pretty sure he's not the type of guy you want to piss off. He made some pretty clear threats on the phone earlier. But you gave him the $8,000 in cash. You can't help that the other account was hacked. If he accepted it, isn't it his problem now? I doubt he sees it like that. Anyway, he doesn't know our exact address. I met his guy by the garages where he dropped the RV off. I don't think they'll struggle to find out our house number. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? We had to leave. I knew it wouldn't be long before he came for the rest of that money. Jay needed that parcel today, though, Cuss. It's a watch he was supposed to fix and send back tomorrow evening. He hasn't stopped blowing my phone up. Look. Tilde showed Marcus a string of notifications from her brother. Early that afternoon, he'd said, "Are you still in tomorrow for that parcel?" Followed by, "Let me know ASAP, Matilda, it's important." Then 3 question marks. She'd also received 14 missed calls, the last of which attempted only a few minutes ago. Why didn't you tell him you're not in tomorrow? You could have maybe done something about it if you knew you weren't. No, because then he'd ask why, and I'm not ready to go into that yet. Marcus didn't bother asking for her reasoning. He knew there was an unusual dynamic between Tilde and her older sibling. It was as if she were physically incapable of disappointing him. Her parents were long separated, and he saw many similarities between his girlfriend and the mother who'd raised her, in both physical likeness and temperament. Freya, the Bangladeshi-born artist, was an incredibly free-spirited woman. Like Matilda, she was sweet and good-natured, fanciful and lacking common sense. Matilda adopted her mom's maiden name, Basu. Her considerably older brother, Jay, however, had been an adult at the time of the split, and it was telling that he went by their dad's surname, O'Doherty. It was much easier to see how he and his father were related. Although Marcus had only met Mr. O'Doherty a handful of times, it was clear that he was a stern man, cold and prone to bouts of instability and shortness of temper, and it was evident that the apple did not fall far from the tree. No matter how amiable Jay attempted to be when Marcus was present, any fool could detect the severe, passive-aggressive manner he occasionally adopted with Tilde. Most troubling, though, was a story she once shared with him in confidence. When she was a teenager, The two of them had had an argument, which culminated in Jay trying to choke her. Marcus thought it best to stay out of family affairs, especially those long in the past. But he'd ever since been wary of the brother and held him in especially low regard. Look, without a signature, the parcel will just bounce back to the depot. You can go and collect it from there. Not without the slip, he can't. Besides, he needs it tomorrow. I don't know what to tell you, babe. We're not going back. Tilde stared at him without saying anything for a moment. It was clear she wanted to contend his decision. Perhaps having more tangible details to grasp, however, like a Russian with an actual name, gave reality to this new danger. Would he not just call the police, this Serge guy? Joking, aren't you? Think he'd sooner take the financial hit than have the pig sniffing around him? I see. Sounds like just the guy you want to do business with. Marcus shrugged. This thing was a bargain. Tilde rubbed her eyes and yawned. Where are we sleeping tonight? You can sleep wherever. What's that supposed to mean? You just need to put the sheets on the bed. He nodded behind him. I hadn't planned on stopping for a while. It's too late to find a campsite. We're not staying in a lay-by. Tilde often called Marcus a highly functioning insomniac. The idea of driving through the night did not seem like an ordeal, and at present he was far too amped up to sleep. It also gave him comfort to try and put as much distance between them and home as possible in a single drive. If he felt his eyelids starting to feel heavy, he'd simply stop at a service station, splash some cold water on his face, and soldier on. Tilde stretched. Okay, well, don't forget about the deliveries. They're all on my phone. Despite grunting in the affirmative, Marcus had no intention of arranging the deliveries himself. She was the early bird of the relationship, and he'd sooner risk another argument tomorrow than halt his progress now. No, he thought, just keep driving. Let her post the gear in the morning. Marcus had been oscillating between several strategies of escape as he attempted to contend with the trauma of recent events. The further he considered it, the more his camper van plan had seemed like the only solid option. From his initial fantasies of hitting the road or sitting behind the wheel in the present moment, it still felt like the correct decision. All the freedom in the world could not keep the demons fully at bay, though. The image of Gaz's hanging body still haunted him whenever he was left with a moment to think. The man's contorted, panic-stricken face, the way he helplessly scratched at the cable. Marcus knew these images might never leave him. He could only hope they would become less vivid over time. The dealer had developed a talent for suppressing unwanted memories. It came of practice. He'd been doing it since early childhood. Perhaps he'd overly romanticized this plan of indefinitely roaming. Just he and Tilde on a glorious, endless stretch of road with the occasional bit of work scattered here and there. The reality seemed far less certain. He was still the same person, with the same emotional baggage, no matter how far they travelled. He lamented his virtual nest egg, the one thing he thought he'd never sacrifice. Perhaps he should see the hacking as a blessing. He'd have lost his currency regardless. At least now he had a motorhome to show for it. Back on the lonely motorway, virtually deserted at this ungodly hour, and with Tilde fast asleep, he felt his chest tight with apprehension. In the compartment to his right was a box filled with pre-rolled joints. He decided to light one. After 20 minutes or so, trundling down the slow lane, he could almost feel his disquiet start to dissolve. He flicked through radio channels, skipping songs and listening to the ones with chatter, anything that gave him some sense of inclusion and cheerful association. With a second joint burning a little while later, he found himself deeply engrossed in a lively discussion about the source of creativity. It was perhaps only the pleasant patter of conversation that captivated him, the bouncy cadence and energetic manner one woman conveyed her points with. The florid details, such as references to artists and musicians he'd never even heard of, sailed entirely over his head. Presently, he was in a nice, distracted groove. His eyes were fixed on the road, and his mind wandered only in accordance with the resonances of the radio. He was finally starting to feel relaxed, achieving a peaceful apathy not experienced for weeks. Then he saw it in his rearview mirror. A black Ford Transit with tinted side windows. It slowed down in the overtaking lane and moved behind him. Marcus froze with panic.
Okay, that was J.W. Voyce reading a sample chapter from his debut novel, Ending Samsara. The book is available right now, so click that link in the show notes for the book and to follow J.W. Make sure you're also clicking the link for all of our podcast friends and sponsors alike. pick yourself up a free book from Audible on a free trial. And don't forget that sale that's going on with TeePublic. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out next week when I am back again with David H. Hanks, winner of the Nobel Prize, and his Carson Griffin series. We're going to be hearing about that next week, so click that subscribe button and we will see you then. Take care, everybody.
This has been a presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.